Hi, everyone. It's Gracy Obuchowicz. I'm the Director of Educator Wellness for Empower Ed. And as we close out 2024 on the podcast, our team had the idea that it would be great to talk about how educators can get the most out of their winter break time for their own self-care, their own restoration, their own relaxation. And we decided that I would be the best person to talk about this. So I'm going to be here with you solo today, and it's going to be a short episode as a way to celebrate what we've done and to really think about how to start 2025 with as much wellness as possible. A bit about my background is that I have been a wellness and self-care coach for a very long time, over a decade now. And I ran a business for many years where I helped individuals get better at their self-care. And it was called Self-Care with Gracie. I still have a web presence. If you want to look for it, you can. But really what I found was that I couldn't tell people about their self-care. And I could give lots of things. And we all know that sleep, nutrition, exercise, these are really important parts of our self-care. And we all kind of know what we're supposed to do. And I learned this pretty early on, that most people know what they're supposed to do for themselves. But where you have to work if you're helping someone with their wellness and their self-care is what gets in the way of those things happening. Because as many people as I worked with that knew exactly what they were supposed to do or had a good idea of what they were supposed to do, they also were not doing it. And so we began to dig into those places. So what I want to share in this podcast episode is about how to get the most out of your wellness and how to look at what can get in the way of that. So there are three things I want to share today. And the first is about understanding how guilt affects your self-care and your wellness. I think this is especially important for teachers because teachers are conditioned to be givers. And I think that this conditioning can start before you were ever in the classroom, is that probably everyone who's in education to the most part has a generous spirit, that you feel good when you give, you love service, you feel good when someone gives back to you. But I think often certain generous spirits are just conditioned early on to be like, you have to give, you have to give. And then you go into the field of education and you are just, set up to be an overgiver all the time because the system lacks the resources that it needs to be fully functional. And educators are the ones who have to fill in those gaps. And when it's difficult to become critical of that, when we're not always able to critique the system, sometimes we can internalize that, or we can do both. We can critique the system, but we still internalize it. If only I could give more. And so what happens is that you're conditioned to do this. That conditioning is reinforced through your job to give and give and give. And even though you're getting something from it on some level in the classroom, in your school, that it has its impact. And then you go to a break where hopefully the focus can be on you and giving back to yourself. And then all of a sudden you start to feel guilty about giving to yourself, that you keep giving to other people. So I think it's helpful to learn to recognize guilty feelings, to when guilt is arising of like, oh no, this is selfish. I shouldn't take the afternoon off. This person needs me and this person needs me. To stop and just recognize that, like, I need rest and relaxation and restoration for me to be able to do my job well. And something is getting in the way of that. And I know that many educators out there are also parents or they're caregivers for other people. And those realities are real. I have young kids. I understand the kind of energy and caregiving that takes. But to see if there are some ways to work in your own wellness no matter what, and to not let guilt be the thing that stops you would be the challenge that I give to you. And so what the reframe that I like to give around guilt is that when guilty feelings come up around you taking time for yourself, to really recognize that is you switching gears from taking care of other people into taking care of yourself. And switching gears anytime there's a transition is uncomfortable. You can see it in your students that anytime you have to transition from one thing to another, it brings up feelings. If somebody's kind of been holding a feeling, it will come out in the transition. And so to just not be upset with yourself if you have some feelings like that, if you're starting to switch over to taking care of yourself and all of a sudden you feel really anxious, if you feel really sad, if you feel really overwhelmed, that's not a sign that you're doing your self-care wrong or a sign that you should not be doing self-care for yourself. But rather it's like the threshold of being like, okay, here I am with myself and I have to deal with myself. And that involves some feelings, that involves some uncomfortable feelings. I'll never forget when I was in my 20s, I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And I went there honestly, just being like, I'm going to feel great. I'm finally going to have some time to be quiet and be with myself. And I had to deal with so many uncomfortable feelings that I'd stayed so busy in my typical life that I didn't have to deal with those feelings. And so I think it would be great if we lived in a world where self-care always felt really good, but sometimes it is about giving yourself some space to really process if you've had a difficult first fall, if anything hard is going on in your classroom or in your life, that letting those feelings and just caretaking those feelings being a way that you can transition into doing some of the other self-care as well. If you are experiencing a lot of those feelings, I really welcome you to embrace like very bodily self-care, like warm baths, hot water bottles, massages if you can make that work for yourself, snuggling under blankets, but just to like really soothe your body as you're feeling those emotions. Talk to a friend, talk to a trained professional, write in a journal. But the feelings and processing those feelings on the other side of that is where you're going to feel better. So just welcome the guilt, understand it for what it is, welcome the feelings that are underneath the guilt, and then take care of yourself within that. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to allow yourself to really sink into that wellness that you can provide for yourself over winter break. The next thing I want to share is about your rest style, because I hear a lot from educators who are like, what are you looking forward to on winter break right now? And they're like, not having an alarm, just being able to lay around. And it is because the education schedule, you have to be so on the go all the time. You don't get that downtime. You don't get that sleeping in time. And we welcome that for you. And just to say that not everybody rests in the same way. And some people, like, you're just going to be really good at it. I know people in my life who are nappers, and they're like, give me 15 minutes and I am asleep. And personally, this is not how my nervous system works. I can hold on to a lot during the day. And when I settle down, like, those things can come up. My mind can often feel busier when I take a nap. And so it's understanding that sometimes what rest is for you to go be around some people where you feel loved and supported. And it's actually, there can be a social aspect to rest. It can be a, like, I'm not going to talk to anybody today aspect to rest. It can be a task orientation to rest. Like, sometimes cleaning your apartment, sometimes doing a craft, sometimes cooking, that can feel actually like rest. And it's because some people need to rest in motion. And that act of doing something manual where you're involving your body, where it's not super cerebral, your brain's not incredibly involved in it, that can help to settle your nervous system down. So what I would invite you to do is to check in with yourself when you're resting. Like, is being under the covers and watching the show I really want to watch, is that working for me? And if it is, you hopefully will get, like, maybe not a whole body yes, but at least like a half body yes, to be like, this is where I need to be right now. If it's not, then I encourage you to experiment with some other rest styles. Like, go call a friend and go for a walk with that friend. Go cook something really beautiful and intentional that you wouldn't have time to do during the school year, and see if that helps to relax you. This pre-service was very busy for Empower Ed, and it was like one of the busiest work periods I've ever had, where there was like no time, working on the weekends, and I had one day off, and I wanted to pull the covers over my heads, and instead we went and we spent the day with some friends, and our kids were there was tons of children, there was tons of people. I'm a bit more of an introverted person, so normally that would bring me some feeling of stress or having to exert myself. And I actually felt so relaxed at the end of the day. And I was like, oh, it was being around people. It was feeling loved. It was laughing. It was having fun. So see what it is for you. It might not be what it's always been. And the only way that you really know is that you check in with yourself. And where I see people get stuck in their wellness is when they're taking what someone else has told them, or a past version of what self-care has felt like for them, and they're trying to make it work for themselves, but it doesn't work anymore. Because the truth is we change. And you've changed from last year to this year. It's just how it is. And your self-care needs will change along with that. So just keep experimenting and making that work for yourself. The last part of getting the most wellness out of your winter break is a tricky one, which is about New Year's resolutions. And it says something that I think naturally we start to think about this time of year. And it comes out a lot because of the way that we just go wild during the holiday season. I feel like I'm right in the thick of it in life right now, where party or event every single night, treats everywhere I look, and it's not enough sleep, too much socialization, and I don't feel my best right now, and it gets more as we go into the holidays. And then after the holidays we kind of slump, and it's really wonderful to think about having a New Year's resolution, and next year's going to be different. I'm a turn over a new leaf. The problem with this is it doesn't work. And we think about how this goes for people is that you party too hard in the holidays. January 1st comes, you set a really ambitious goal for yourself because you want to do that, because you do care about yourself and you want to be your best. And then you work really, really hard at this goal. And then it doesn't usually last past January. And it's very central to the self-care work that I've taught over the years and our self-care approach in schools, which is about when we try to make changes, the reason they fail is because they're too big. And it's just how our nervous systems work, is that the changes are too big, we exert too much, and part of us, even if we want the change, we can't handle that much change at once. And so what we teach as an antidote to that is the smallest possible change. It's something called Kaizen. It's a Japanese word that means small change, good change, ongoing change. But it is, instead of taking the biggest change, you make the smallest change. So it's like if you feel like you've been eating too much sugar and you want to give up sugar and you've been eating it every single day, and like you giving up sugar is going to add stress to your experience because it's so different than what you've been doing. So the Kaizen would be like, if I'm going to eat a cupcake, I'm going to eat half of the cupcake. It's not like, there's part of you that's going to be like, but you shouldn't be eating cupcakes. But it is about making that transition. And then maybe after you eat half a cupcake for a few days, you're good to go down to a quarter of a cupcake. Maybe you decide within a few days you actually don't want the cupcake. But it's not, you're not forcing yourself to do that change. Again, in your classrooms, I know that you've experienced this, that when you try to teach something that's too big, make a scheduled transition that's too much, you recognize that you need to pull back and teach a skill first, go a little bit smaller. And it's the same way with our wellness. It is something that I've watched, like literally hundreds of people as they experiment with this, like they found so much more traction in their wellness because it's workable. They feel progress, you feel momentum that starts to build. Kaizen's not a one and done. It is about like, okay, I made that little change. What do I do next? But that's what wellness to me really feels like, is that you start to feel like, okay, I'm in the process of becoming more and more. And again, we're changing all the time, but I'm going to guide that change. I'm going to be present in that change. I'm going to bring that change into next year, and not to like try to do everything all at once and then get upset with yourself if it doesn't work out. So I would encourage you to just embrace the small change mindset in the new year. If you want to, if you like kind of setting a goal or something in the new year, I invite you to set an intention for the year or pick a word for that year, but not to force yourself into like becoming a whole new person, because you know what? You're amazing and you're beautiful and you are a giver and you have a big open heart. And that just requires care. And and I really hope that you can have that care for yourself and kind of find your set point where you can come back to yourself if it has been a tough start to the school year, and really get what you need to go back into school in January. So we're gonna take a break until January on Empower Ed. We're gonna come back with some really exciting podcast episodes on mentorship and how some of the programs we've been doing in school. So we're very excited to share that with you. Please reach out to us if you want to share anything. And we're thinking of you all. So thank you so much for listening, and very happy holidays and happy New Year to you.